Hi, my name is Rebecca Henderson, and I'm here to talk about reimagining capitalism. A small subject I can cover in half an hour, no problem. That's a joke. Seriously, what do we think about capitalism? I'm a huge fan myself. I'm a professor at the Harvard Business School. I think capitalism is one of the great inventions of the human race, an unparalleled source of innovation, prosperity, and change. But I am nervous. We live in a world on the edge. Let me ask you, please put up your hand if you're worried about the direction our world is going in. How many people are a little bit worried? Quite a few. Tell me, those of you who have children or know teenagers, are some of them a little angry, in despair, enraged, furious? How many people know young people like that? How many people know teens who are suicidal? Isn't it scary that it's not just one or two hands? What kind of moment is this? War in Europe, startling levels of inequality, the biosphere coming unraveled, a climate emergency. How do we think about this? I want to do a deep dive into climate change to give you a sense of how I think we can generate hope and action at this extraordinary moment. And it shouldn't be called climate change, it should be called climate weirding or global heating. Let's get specific. Let's talk about what's really going on. Let's talk about Florida's upcoming bankruptcy. So, some facts. How an economy is supposed to work. What's supposed to happen is people settle in an attractive location. They build a community and government and developers borrow money to build. People migrate to the new location. They take out long-term mortgages to buy homes. Governments and developers repay investors with sales taxes, fees, and other taxes. That's how it's supposed to work. So, let's look at what's holding Florida together. Florida is working because there's home insurance. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, they must buy Florida mortgages. Rating agencies must endorse municipal bonds. People need to continue moving to Florida. And yes, investors need to keep lending. That's what Florida needs to keep going. Let me tell you some facts about Florida. The Floridan Peninsula is built on porous limestone. Recent development has been almost entirely along the coasts on the limestone. Municipalities depend on property tax revenue. There is no income tax in Florida. Florida's infrastructure is very new, so by and large, maintenance is not in the budget. Meanwhile, warmer ocean water is powering bigger rainfall and fiercer storms. A higher ocean is pushing into Florida's aquifers and sewers, and Florida's weather is getting hotter and more humid. A few things that have already happened in Florida. The catastrophic bond market has largely dried up. Big insurers are pulling out, and small ones are liquidating. The reinsurers, Swiss Re and Munich Re, have already pulled out. Florida's government has set up its own insurance company. Meanwhile, banks are offloading Floridian loans to Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Sunny day flooding is accelerating, land is increasingly salty, bigger storms increasingly common. So let's recap. Florida faces significantly higher operating costs. Few municipal budgets include maintenance, let alone replacement costs. Capital providers are starting to pull back. Disney World is becoming a seasonal business, and Florida is continuing to bet on in-migration. Let's talk about how states and cities go bankrupt. Here's what happens. Aging and failing infrastructure and social programs require more spending. So governments increase tax rates and fees. People leave. The rich leave first. In-migration slows or stops. Property prices stop rising and begin to fall. Government revenues fall, and Florida goes bankrupt. We don't know when. 5 years? 10 years? The bond markets seem to think it's quite soon. So here's the thing. This is not just a story about Florida. This is a story about civilization. Let's talk a little bit about civilization and what it's based on. So, 200,000 years ago, the first human, Homo sapiens, people like you and I, emerged. The first settlements emerged about 10,000 years ago. And modern civilization, in the sense of debt markets and government securities and limited liability companies, emerged only within the last few hundred years. So one question you might be asking yourself is, why didn't humans settle before 9,500 BCE? Well, they didn't settle because the climate was too unstable to allow anyone to stay in one place. Human settlements emerged when the climate settled down enough so that you could stay in roughly the same place and kind of count on the weather being roughly the same seasonally over time. So we've only been a settled species for about 10,000 years. It was a stable climate that made it possible to build settled communities. And they made it possible to build settled government. And that made it possible to build cultures, and that built infrastructure, and then industry, and only then do we get finance markets. The climate of civilization was perfect for humans. Large expanses of temperate land, stable seasonal patterns, nowhere too hot for the human body. But that's not true anymore. We have started to heat up the planet. And one of the symptoms of heating up the planet is not just that it's a little bit warmer, it's that everything is starting to swing. The probability of 100-year droughts, 100-year floods, that this summer will be the hottest summer on record, everything is starting to move. This is not good. It's not good at all. Climate change isn't just about warmer weather, it's about instability. It's about being unable to count on what next year is going to look like. That's why the bond markets don't want to lend to Florida, because they just don't know what's coming down the pike. We are starting to shake the very foundations of civilization. We have assumed that the climate would remain stable. Schools have vacations in the summer. City storm sewers are designed for certain rates of rainfall. Detroit, which is some way from the sea, had major flooding a couple of years ago because their storm sewers will only take a 6-inch flood, and they had an 8-inch rain. Half the city was underwater. Power systems are meant to withstand certain maximum temperatures. They were designed in an era in which it never got hotter than X. Houses in many places are built to keep heat in rather than to keep heat out, and all agriculture is dependent on steady rainfall. we are shaking the very foundations of the world that we have built. And it's not coincidence that finance and industry are shaking hard. Let me give you a concrete example. Climate change in London. In July 2021, a month's worth of rain fell in just hours. This was a 1 in 100-year storm. And because we're raising the temperature, those have become much more likely. What happened? We had sewage flooding into children's rooms at hospitals, and another hospital taking on 3 feet of water and closing down. The public transport system was inundated, 14 tube stations closed, all the above-ground trains shut down. The mayor said that what London needs is more homes built, that the city needs at least 66,000 new homes for the next 2 decades. But if they don't fix the storm sewers, nobody's building. Let's talk about temperature. This is a graph of what's called wet bulb temperature. To be precise, 28 degrees wet bulb temperature. That means places in the world which are going to reach 28 degrees at wet bulb, that is 100% humidity. And at 28% wet bulb, it is dangerous for human beings to go outside. It is too hot for the human body. We're looking at a world right now where there are several places where 28 degrees wet bulb is prevalent for as much as 6 months in the year. If we hit 1.5 degrees centigrade, which we're hoping to keep warming to, that's the current target, you see that there will be large areas of South America, Africa, that's Bangladesh and Pakistan, all that red, Northern Australia. Look at what's going to happen in China and the Far East. For several months of the year, it will be dangerous to work outside. If we blow through 1.5 degrees C, which it seems we may, I hope not, but it is entirely possible, look at how it spreads. Look at the effect in the US. There are already several days a year where it's too hot to go outside in parts of the US when the humidity is that high, and that will increase. If we go further, 2.5, 3, we don't want to live in this world. This is a world of millions of people on the move, billions of people on the move because they cannot stay where they are. If we look at temperatures above 32 degrees C, and this is not wet bulb, this is everywhere in the world where you can expect to see 32 degrees C, that's 90 degrees Fahrenheit. At 100% humidity, this is fatal. If you're outside in 32 degrees C and it's 100% humidity, you will die. If you stay outside, you will die. About that deep red, the deep red you're looking at, that's where in the world those conditions are going to be in place for more than 6 months of the year. This is not a world we want to live in. And if you're thinking, well, that's fine, Europe's going to be no problem, this is drought. This is the probability of a year-long or more extreme drought. And those those oranges and deep yellows, that's a 30, 40, 50, 60% every year percentage chance of a more than 1 year extreme drought. This is not a world we want to live in. This is not a world we want to even play with. So here's my question to you. How does this make you feel? All of us, for very good reasons, spend a lot of time not thinking about what's happening. But I'd like you, please, to open this up for a little bit. I want you to think about it. I want you to take a moment and think about how you feel about what we're looking at. Take a moment to settle yourself and really touch into that place you don't go to that often. I want you to go there. I want you to feel what this feels like. Touch in with yourself, and then please turn to the person next to you, introduce yourself, and talk a little bit about what's going on and how it makes you feel. A couple of minutes, please. Think and then talk. Okay. So, how does this make you feel? One word, please. Someone give me a word. I want a word, sir. Afraid. Mad? Bad. Bad. B-A-D. Sad. We might feel bad, but we certainly feel sad. Afraid, sad, what else have we got? Activated? You want to do something. It makes you feel like, I got to do something. I got to do something. Good. Any other major emotions coming up here? What's coming up for you? Horrific. Anyone feeling grief? Anyone just feeling really sad, I guess? There's going to be a lot of suffering. We're going to lose a lot of the natural world. Millions of people are going to suffer. Why am I putting you through this? It's not the typical upbeat talk. I'm putting you through this because we need to face the grief. We need to face the anger. No one said anger. Anyone angry? I'm angry. Guilty. Afraid. We need to face the grief. Why? Because if we don't face these kinds of emotions, if we push them down and we sit on them, they sit down there inside us and they turn into despair, depression, and rage. It's not helpful. So, as in all moments of human suffering, we need to face what's going on, hold the grief, and then choose hope. We have to choose hope because realistically, the odds that any single one of us sitting in this room are going to make a difference are teeny tiny, right? And it's possible, I hope it's not true, but it's possible the whole thing could go sideways. So we have to choose hope. In just the same way, the example that inspires me is the struggle of African Americans in the United States. They've been fighting against hopeless odds for, a level playing field for 300 years. And you know what? They get up every morning and they do it again. We have to choose hope. And the good news is the world is moving. There is every reason to be hopeful. No single one of us can make a difference, but together we can absolutely address this problem. We can't solve climate change in the sense of putting everything back the way it was, but we can get to net zero. We can prevent its acceleration. We know the kinds of technologies we need. We have the resources. This is a social and cultural problem. Ending fossil fuels will save millions of lives every year. We should do it just for that reason. And that's an immediate benefit. It's not some off in the future. You close down the coal plant, people's health starts to improve immediately. We have the IRA, the Industrial Recovery Act in the US. This is, I believe, the largest piece of climate legislation ever passed anywhere in the US, in the world. Trillions of dollars for clean technology. In the US, in the current political climate, this is an amazing accomplishment, which should accelerate technical change in the US, hopefully bringing the US technology up with China and Europe. It's about time, some would say, but it's excellent news to have one of the biggest economies really in the fight and really moving. Some models suggest that in the last 5 years, the clean energy we have deployed and begun to deploy has cut our expected warming for this century almost in half. I've been obsessed with climate for 20 years now. 20 years ago, 15 years ago, nobody believed we could have clean energy cheaper than coal, and now we do. This is amazing. Solar installed capacity of renewables is booming. There is every reason to be hopeful. We need government, of course. We need regulation, sensible regulation, pricing for carbon, moving the economy in the right direction. Absolutely, we need government, and we need well-managed government in balance with free markets. But we need you. You really matter. Really, really, really. You should feel, I think, so excited that you are not a dentist. Now, my apologies to any of you who are dentists. It's a worthy profession and very important, and I'm delighted I know a dentist. But the ability of dentists to affect the future trajectory of world history is limited. Not zero, but limited. But you're in Scandinavia, one of the richest, best educated, most innovative regions in the world. You have choices. You can make an enormous difference. You could be catalytic in showing the rest of the world what some of these technologies look like. You're already moving in that direction. I already know a bunch of amazing Scandinavian entrepreneurs who are doing fabulous work. This is what we need, and you can play a really important role. So here's what you need to do. You ready? This is the action part of the presentation. First action. Practice joy. I really mean it. If you're grappling with these kinds of issues, it's easy to get burnt out, to get overwhelmed. So it's really important to resource yourself. And I don't just mean get enough sleep and enough exercise. I assume that you're already doing that. I mean touch into the deepest part of yourself that understands that it's not about the bottom line. It's about building a better world for our children. It's about being proud of what you do at work. It's about really making a difference you can be proud of for the rest of your life. So practice joy. What does that mean? Being an engineer and an economist, I got to be concrete about that. What does practicing joy mean? It means 10 to 15 minutes every day. That's all. Spend some time doing something that takes you to your deepest self. Pay attention. Just pay really close attention to this beautiful world we're in. Practice gratitude, a very effective way of thinking about this. Walk in nature. Go dancing. Go singing. Hold your children. Do something that takes you away from the frenzy and the craziness. You know what I mean, right? That feeling that there's never enough time and you can never run fast enough and you've just got to do more. It's very corrosive. Take some time to touch in, to breathe. And when you've done that, then you can reimagine capitalism. So how do we reimagine capitalism? Well, fortunately, I have just, 10 slides, gives you the whole story. No problem, here we go. How do we reimagine capitalism? Well, first, we reimagine the purpose of the firm. The purpose of the firm is not to make money and maximize shareholder value. The purpose of the firm is to build a thriving and prosperous community. That was always the purpose of the firm. If you went back 40 or 50 years ago and said to a successful entrepreneur, well, my purpose is just to maximize shareholder value, they would think you had lost your mind. The purpose of the firm is to create great jobs and deliver products and services that people really want in a way that doesn't harm the community. That's the purpose of the firm. Now, I understand that making money is necessary. I have more than 25 years' experience on major public boards, including a Fortune 200 company and one of the fastest growing firms in the US in the last 20 years. I know you have to make money. I know you have to keep investors happy, but that is a means to an end. It's not the end. We all need to breathe. But the purpose of life is not breathing. The purpose of life is to make a difference, to go dancing, to embrace the people you love. So we need to change the purpose of the firm. We need to lead from purpose. My guess is that for at least half the people in this room, this is an obvious idea, that many of your firms were founded on purpose. They were founded to create great jobs or really bring prosperity to their community. They're already purpose-driven. But we need to be more explicit. The good news is there is lots of evidence to suggest that having an authentic purpose, and you know what I mean by authentic. I mean, you really make hard choices sometimes, you treat people with dignity and respect, you really mean it, that has an incredible effect on productivity and creativity. Why? Because treating people with dignity and respect, giving them meaning in their lives, giving people decent work and a reason to come to work very significantly increases strategic alignment, intrinsic motivation, that is how people are excited about what they're doing, and trust. And all the research, every management presentation suggests this is tightly correlated with performance. Now, you may be thinking, but wait, if this were really the case, all purpose-driven firms would be wildly more profitable than ordinary firms. Alas, not, because being purpose-driven is a little expensive. You have to do the right thing. You have to invest in your employees. But there is no evidence to suggest it reduces profitability, and every reason to believe that it increases creativity, risk-taking, and oh my goodness, it's more fun. So you can be purpose-driven and make money. Second step, create shared value. What does that mean? That means in addition to making money, because you do have to stay in business, you also address public problems. This is not some pie-in-the-sky fairy tale. This is what every good firm already does. Every time you create a good job or sell a decent product, you're addressing public problems. I'm just talking about pushing that a little harder because we have some emergencies on our hands. So every firm that can should absolutely be thinking, how do I reduce fossil fuel emissions? How do I put building a fossil fuel economy at the core of my strategy? Completely possible. At the Harvard Business School, we have more than 300 cases describing firms who have built successful businesses on this basis. Make money, address decarbonization. There are at least 5 different business models, all the way from attracting really fabulous people. My students want to work from firms that are making a difference. That's what they want. They're afraid they will never see lives as good as the lives we have now. They're afraid the whole thing is going to go south. This is what they want to do. Hire them. I'm sure they're here in Finland too. Addressing climate change reduces long-term strategic risks. Iberdrola, 10 years before any of its major European rivals, except Enel, decided to invest in renewable energies as a hedge against the coming energy transition. When the European Union introduced regulations making it much more expensive to use fossil fuels to generate electricity, Enel and Iberdrola were the only major European utilities that retain their market value and their position. Cut costs. Walmart is one of my favorite firms. Very purpose-driven. And they took $1 billion to the bottom line simply by re-engineering the fuel efficiency of their trucking fleet. Even for Walmart, that's a lot of money. And in the last 5 years, they've reduced their fossil fuel usage by 23%, making money every step of the way. This is Walmart we're talking about. They have no spare money. They have helped their supply chain take sufficient fossil fuel emissions out to be equivalent to taking 200 million cars off the road, all while making money. You'll say, well, why isn't every firm doing this? Because everyone is busy. Everyone has something else to do. Change is hard, but this is not a problem we can avoid anymore. The money is there. What we need is the will and the vision. You can build your brand. There's very little evidence that except for Teslas, people will pay more for decarbonized products. There's a small group of consumers, people like me, highly educated middle-aged women, will pay more for sustainable products, but almost nobody else will. But people will switch. At Unilever, they have found that their purpose-driven brands are growing 30 to 40% faster than their more conventional brands. If you give people what they want and also a chance to make a difference, they will take it. And of course, there's a whole bunch of entirely new businesses. Totally decarbonizing the world's economy is a massive opportunity. We need to transform, wait for it, electricity generation, power distribution, transportation, infrastructure, construction, food, IT, healthcare. Let's see, that's about 70% of the world's economy. This is massive opportunity. Forgive me, this is a battery plant. SK is a big Korean chemicals conglomerate where the CEO has decided he's going to completely transform the company and he's massively invested in electric batteries. Think about what's happening in the food industry. This is the Impossible Burger. Complete transformation of the food industry. We need to basically stop eating beef and plant the pasture lands in trees. So, individual firms can make a significant difference, showing other firms how it's done, showing governments that there is money here and that regulation that moves in this direction supports innovation and health and the long-term goal of decarbonization. The other thing we need to do is learn to cooperate, because there are some problems we can't tackle alone. Perhaps some of you are in the textile industry, one of the most polluting industries on the planet. And if any firm tries to make a change alone, they can't afford it. But if everyone moves together, then you can afford it. So this is why the consumer goods industry formed a partnership to stop deforestation in Brazil and Indonesia and Malaysia. And no, they haven't succeeded completely, but they made an enormous difference, saying to the suppliers, we will not buy from you unless you stop deforesting. One of my favorite cooperative ventures is Mission Possible, which is working hard to find new ways of producing steel and cement with far less fossil fuels, jointly funded by the leading firms in each industry. So, create shared value, learn to cooperate. Oh, and just this little thing. We need to rewire finance and accounting. I could talk for approximately all day just on this topic, but I'll make do with a single slide. What gets measured gets managed. So we need new metrics. Our existing ESG, environmental, social, and governance metrics are not perfect by any means. But that doesn't mean we don't need to keep working on getting better measures. My advice to individual firms is pick the measures that are material, auditable, and replicable, that really communicate about your business and what you're doing in this space, so you can talk to investors and employees and customers about the difference you're making and the plans you have and the milestones on which you need to be measured. So, in summary, a roadmap to reimagining capitalism. All you need to do is create shared value, build cooperation, rewire finance, fix the institutions, and embrace a purpose beyond profits. No problem. Change is never easy. I spent my career looking at major firms who found it very difficult to move through transitions. They say, it's not happening, we won't make any money, and we're just too busy. Don't let this happen to you. This transition is coming. Grasp it, lead it. It's the leaders who make the money, the leaders who generate the brand equity and the employee loyalty. We see firms across the world grasping this change and moving forward. So, here's what you need to do tomorrow morning. Choose one thing that will move you and your organization closer to purpose, closer to acting from purpose. You're from a huge variety of organizations and a huge variety of functions. I don't know what it is, but I know that you know. I know that this is the moment to stop thinking this is something you'll do later or too busy or too much risky, and do it today or tomorrow, but certainly before the end of the week. And in the meantime, here's what we all need to do for the rest of our lives. We need to choose hope, embrace joy, and dare to act. This is the moment. We have 10 years for our children's future and their children. We have to act. Thank you very much.
Well, that was just what we promised. A little bit of inspiring, a little bit of challenging, and a little bit of terrifying. I didn't mention that. We've got a little bit of time for just a couple of questions. There's some doozies here. One of the questions that a lot of folks, kind of thumbs up, because you can thumbs up questions in the app, is this one that comes from someone who just calls themselves Estonian. The question is, if China doesn't change, there's no significant change, and as long as the West does business with China, isn't all this talk about a green economy a bit hypocritical? So I guess it's, what do we do about the China situation?
No, here's the interesting thing about China. China's significantly further advanced than Europe or the US. Europe is very sophisticated, but in terms of the renewable energy transition, the Chinese have built more solar energy and installed more solar energy just in the last year than the US at least has done in the last 10. I mean, the numbers are very dramatic. One of the good things about an autocratic country is that when they see a major threat, they can really act. And President Xi sees that climate change is a major, major risk. The risk is that the glaciers on the Tibetan plateau will disappear, and that essentially will disappear the water supply for China. So they're massively committed to this transition. It's a little bit bumpy. It's bumpy everywhere, but it is absolutely happening in China, and their goal is to dominate the transition and the technologies of the transition. That's one of the reasons that you're so important. I myself am a little bit nervous about having an autocratic regime dominate the key transitions we need for the next 20 years. So we need the free world to really move to.
Well, if it makes a difference to you, well, America might just have an autocratic regime after the next election anyway, so who knows? There is another question, and I just lost it. Oh, it was such a good one too. Boy, so this is what it is. It's about public opinion, because here we are in this room full of folks that are on board already. Doggone it. It's on board already. So I've just, the software's, I feel like I'm making a Zoom call right now. This is the one.
In front of 6,000 people,
well,
right.
We had a Zoom call file out earlier, yeah, but I feel like I should be on mute.
Okay.
We're all on board, right? We're all, world changers in the room, or at least we like to tell ourselves we are. What is, in your opinion, needed for the majority of civilization to really start to believe and then act for impact? How do we change the minds that aren't in this room? Oh, that was a laugh-worthy one.
I love these tiny questions. Like, yes, absolutely. What we need is a huge global social and economic movement that says, this is not okay, we need to change. How do we get that? Well, the people in the room are not off the hook. Because one of the reasons we don't yet have that movement is people still wonder whether it's possible. I meet too many people under 30 who are kind of falling into despair. So we really need action. Concrete examples of how change can be driven make an enormous difference. And then We need activism at scale and a real shift in human values and a new way of thinking about being human. But I'm not going to talk about that today. Next week, okay? No, seriously, I think we need a major shift. I think it's coming. I think I can see it in my students. I think I can see it globally. But we need to do the work that we can do to help make that happen.
Well, the questions aren't tiny, and that means that they take up our time. So I'm afraid that's all the time we have. But thank you so much for being here. Thank you all for your questions. Ladies and gentlemen, Professor Rebecca...